Hi, I'm Sahana.
I'm Meghana.
And this is Shankri, our co-host and co-producer. Today we're going to be discussing the effect of technology on the human psyche through two short stories by Ray Bradbury, The Veldt and the Happiness Machine. To get us started, do you want to give us a short summary on who Ray Bradbury was?
Yeah, of course. So Ray Bradbury was a very popular author, and he's famous for popularizing modern science fiction in the literary mainstream. One of his most famous books is Fahrenheit 451, which that temperature is the temperature at which books burn, which is the main focus of that book, which is a dystopian science fiction novel. He is known for his prose, his unique style of prose, and also how he discusses human characterization through his works.
Mm-hmm. So today we're going to be discussing a short story collection by Ray Bradbury, specifically two stories from there, and we're going to see how the human psyche shifts and how our reliance on technology can sometimes hurt us. So to start us off, I'm going to give us a summary of The Veldt, which is the first story we'll be discussing. The Veldt follows these two parents, George and Lydia, as well as their children, Peter and Wendy. George and Lydia are like any parents. They want what's best for their child. So they have an extremely technologically advanced house. In their house, there's machines that tie their shoes, that cook their food, that do basically everything for them. In addition, they have a room, the nursery, where their children can play. The nursery is special in the fact that anything you wish for, anything you desire for in your mind to see, then the nursery will show you that, and it will be extremely realistic. So initially, what their children dream of in the nursery are like regular things, which are like Aladdin and like all of these fantasy worlds. But eventually, they start hyperfixating on this one Sahara, this one Veldt, this African Veldt, which is essentially like this grassland. And on it, there are lions, and these lions are always having this mysterious piece of meat in their mouths. So the parents are kind of put off by this, obviously. And as time goes on, things get creepier and creepier, right? They are upstairs and they hear two familiar screams coming from the nursery room, and they're like, okay, I don't think this is good. They talk to a psychologist about it, and he's like, yes, this is really bad. Your children don't see you as their parents anymore. They see the room as their parents. They see the house as their parents, because the house and the room are what takes care of them. So you need to leave all of this behind, move somewhere else, and it's not too late to end this, right? So both of them are like, okay, sounds good. And as they're moving out, their children are like, please, can we have one last time in the nursery? And they're like, fine, as long as you stop whining. And their children go into the nursery, and they need their kids to go because they're like, okay, we're almost about to leave. So they go into the nursery to get their kids, and they don't see their kids in there. They just see the Sahara, they see the lions, and the lions get closer and closer to them, and then both of them scream. And they realize why the screams they had heard from the nursery before sounded so familiar. And then it just cuts to the children sitting inside of the nursery, and the man who is supposed to help them move out sees them in the nursery, and they're like, oh, kids, where are your parents? And both of them just smile at him and don't say anything. So it's really a haunting story. It's definitely one that had a really big impact. And there's so many different interesting ideas in the story. One of the things that stood out the most to me were that the kids were named Wendy and Peter. Like Wendy and Peter Pan from Neverland. They never wanted to grow up. What else did you notice in the story?
I wanted to go back to that point you said about like the house being their complete authority and them having no respect for their parents. Because when I was reading the story, why do you respect your parents? You respect your parents because they do things for you. Because as a child, you learn to respect your parents because they fold your clothes and they cook you food.
Yeah.
And like if you grew up with good parents, they like care for you. They take care of you. They're responsible for you.
They make money to support you. There's so many things your parents do for you, and you acknowledge these sacrifices and respect them for it.
Exactly. And then that's how they get that source of like authority over you. And that source of authority is a good thing as when you're younger, because it grounds you and shows you like stability and shows you that not everything in the world can be yours. That it shows you that like you shouldn't be able to like have this like complete power over everything around you, and that the world works the way the world works.
But technology doesn't have those same limits that your parents do. It just gives you everything you want.
I remember at the beginning of the story, the mother of the children was concerned that everything in the room was becoming a little too real. But the father reassured her, saying that it was all fake. It's all fake. But the lines at the end of the story are extremely real. And the reason the story sticks out so much is that because it's not that the power of technology is so huge. It's that the kids realized that the power was so huge, and that they realized that there's no limit in order for them to like use that power, right? When you're younger, you kind of like you are exposed to violence like a young age. Like nowadays, you have like video games that are like shooting RPGs and like all this kind of stuff.
And it's just like the things you see in the world around you. If you live in the U.S., you see school shootings. You see all of this violence around you constantly.
You go through fire drills, lockdown drills, hurricane drills. You're exposed to violence like at an early age, and yet though most people may have like the thoughts to like, oh, I want to commit this random act of violence. You have like a conscience telling you, wait, one, we don't have the power to do that, and two, like
that's just bad.
It's a very bad thing to do that. But these children have grown up with kind of this technology that allows them to do anything. They can create entire worlds out of their own mind. Imagine the sense of power that gives you.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, I was out here playing with like wooden structures, right? There's not much you can destroy with wooden structures. But think about the power that room and its advanced technology can give you. And the fact that they have control over that technology pushes them to like take such horrible actions as to like kill their own parents.
Yeah, and it's like a feedback loop of evil, because initially you're thinking something bad, but then you stop yourself. But what if you didn't stop yourself? Then that evil would lead to more and more and more and more evil. And the second thing, you were mentioning how like they have the ability to create everything in the room, but they're not actually creating anything. It's the room that's creating everything for them. They just have a thought and it manifests. Like, there's a value in creativity. There's a value in doing things for the sake of doing them, that the house now does everything for them. Like the father at one point in the story, he's like, oh, I'm going to switch off a lot of the things in this house. And they're like, wait, so you mean I would have to tie my own shoes and take a bath by myself and like do all of these seemingly basic tasks by myself? Like, why would I ever do that? All I want to do is consume. I just want to see things. I want to smell things. I want to listen to things. And even though it's not to the same extent, I think that is happening in our world today.
Of course.
We like no longer do we want to create things out of our own volition. It's like, oh, I can just like look at other people create things. I can just consume instead of producing anything of value.
I feel like especially with all of like the people on the internet that are like, a lot of people's jobs on the internet are to get we as like a consumer base to like buy things, right? So your job is just like advertising stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times we as consumers do not think about our certain product sustainability, how often we're going to use it, or like is this going to benefit me in the long term? You kind of just like spend your money on it on the spot because your favorite person on the internet is giving a glowing review about it.
Yeah.
And nowadays, like a lot of people aren't even transparent with the ads that they disclose. So that just adds fuel to the fire of the consumerist culture, along with like websites that offer fast fashion and really, really cheap purchases. And people are suddenly buying loads and loads and loads of things. And there, like you said, there's no like fuel to create, to be like, what if instead of buying this thing, I try to make it on my own? So people nowadays, like including like even me at some point, like I feel like I've been like a active participant in this until recently, but I think that there's such value in creating something, and when you kind of subscribe to this consumerist culture and stop creating, your brain kind of like takes an off switch, and you no longer have an outlet for that creativity, and you're no longer picking up skills that you can occupy your time with other than technology.
Yeah. So, like, definitely there's all of these really dark themes in the story. And while this story takes a really dark look at how technology affects people, the second story we're going to discuss actually looks at this in a little bit more of a positive way. It still condones overindulgence in technology, but it does offer us a way out. Do you want to explain the happiness machine?
Yeah, like Sahana said, this story shows us how we can, in fact, take a positive turn on our lives and recover from like that overuse of technology. So this story is called The Happiness Machine, and in it centers this man named Leo Offman, and Leo is living a pretty domestic life with a family in a nice suburban home, and he wants to create a happiness machine, and he's doing it with the best intention to make everyone happy. And his wife Lena is against it because she thinks it's unnatural and it's really going against human nature. However, he does end up creating the machine, and when his son tests it out for the first time, he has 4 kids, and when his kids test it out for the first time, after that, at that same night, he finds his son like crying in his room, and when he goes to comfort him, he realizes that machine actually made his son sad because his son got a taste of the wonders and the beautiful things the machine could provide, and realized that none of that could ever be reality, and it could never be in the real world, and that made him so disappointed. And when his wife figures this out, she is very, very like saddened by the news and heartbroken that this machine made her son like so dejected that she vows to leave her husband. And while she's dividing everything up, he convinces her to try the happiness machine, and she goes and sits inside of it. And when she comes out, she's also crying, heavy, heavy tears. And she's, even though she sounded happy in the machine, and when he asks her out of surprise, like, why are you crying? She's like, when I was in the machine, I saw all of these beautiful places that people want to go to, like Paris and things. And as soon as I came out, I realized that I will never ever be able to experience that feeling again. Like, I will never in this real world be able to see those sights. You know what I mean? Like, it will just never ever be the same. And knowing that I had a taste of that and knowing I can never experience that again makes me so sad. And when he himself goes inside the machine because he's so curious as to what happens, it begins to burn and break. And when he comes out and comes out safely, they kind of like let the machine burn before calling the fire department. Or his wife says, wait, don't call the fire department yet. Let it burn for a little. And then they let the whole thing burn before calling the department.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, when they do call the department, um, the wife and Lena and the kids go inside to start working on dinner, and he's kind of like talking to the fire station people,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes inside and looks through the window of his house, and he sees like the beautiful, like cozy, kind of comforting nature of his house with his like wife and his kids.
He
And all,
sees the people of his household with all their small happiness and their small sadnesses.
exactly, and he sees like this, instead of like this perfect peak of exhilaration, he kind of sees like contentment. And that he's like, this is the happiness machine, this really is the happiness machine. And he goes inside, and that's the end of the story there. And so this story definitely takes a different turn than the Veldt. As in this story, Bradbury still condemns technology, but shows how
Does
the
not
fam-
condemn does not condemn technology, but he's
Wait, he definitely does condemn technology because he's still saying that like too not technology as a whole, but like saying that too much technology is like bad. But like he, at the end of the day, he's saying that like we can take steps forward to make sure that like we don't use that much technology in our daily lives, and we take the steps to kind of ensure that we're appreciating the small things around us, including our family. Which in this story, I particularly found that that family bond is kind of what brought the main character out of his reverie of that I have to create a machine that produces happiness.
And then when you compare that to the Veldt, you see like one of the biggest weaknesses of the family in the Veldt is because that there was no sense of family. Like the children saw the house as their parents because they didn't respect their parents,
Exactly.
and then their parents never like thought their children were like spoiled brats and just did not interact with them as much. And it was like this sharp disconnect which eventually led to their fall. Versus the family in the happiness machine was able to use their strong familial bond to focus on what really mattered. And there's this concept of happiness in both stories, right? The children thought the nursery made them happy. It gave them everything they wanted. It fulfilled all of their desires. The happiness machine also gave you these desires and then fulfilled them to an extent. You could see Paris in some state or form, right? But there's a distinction between these desires and reality. And in the Veldt, they lose sight of that distinction. Mm-hmm. But in the happiness machine, they manage to take a hold on that distinction and be like, true happiness doesn't come from just the fulfillment of desires. It comes from the contentment of living.
Exactly. Like, I want to point out that, like, in the happiness machine, it very, very clearly says, or not clearly says, but it clearly shows you that, like, happiness cannot come from, like, an external source. It can't come from a machine. It can't come from a certain place or certain activity. It comes from, like, inside of you. And while these things, activities, and places can give you a brief sense of happiness, an exhilaration or adrenaline leap, that those things are temporary. Like, you have to find joy in the people around you and inside of yourself, and make these long-lasting connections in order to actually be content and actually live a fulfilling life, which the main character realizes. And yeah.
Yeah, and we'll leave you off on that note. How do you think technology affects your happiness, and how do you think these two things can be balanced? What do you think is the balance between desire and wish fulfillment?
Yeah.
I think these are all really interesting questions that we need to continue asking ourselves, especially into this digital age. Mm-hmm. The things that Ray Bradbury thought was dystopia, it's more and more, it's just actually happening. Reality. Exactly. So really question yourselves. Like, be able to be self-critical. Have people in your life to hold you accountable. Like Lena was able to hold Leo accountable because without these people, you might like lose sight of what really matters and lose your grounding.
I find it helpful to like ask yourself before you like buy something or decide like this is something I really need, to like ask yourself if like you can make it yourself at home, or like if you can learn a skill in order to do this, if you have the resources and the funds.
Exactly. So there's just this complex web between technology and consumerism and the human psyche and happiness that we can really explore, and we can really find out what works for us.
Exactly.
So definitely keep thinking about that. And thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, we definitely recommend that you read these stories and more of Ray Bradbury's work, because he is truly like an amazing author.
And it really gives you a view into this world.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you
for
so much.
watching.
Bye.
Bye.